Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Origins Part 2. So this is your second lesson in the second half of it because I got a lot to say and not a lot of time to say it. Alright, so let's get into our origins of government. Now, we have talked about kind of just the nitty-gritty of how we got from an absolute monarch in England all the way to colonies being established, all the way to us being like, you know what, King, you can go ahead and go. We had a whole war about it. So, we did not speak at all about the colonists or other humans besides colonists who are here in the colonies during the period of salutary neglect and beforehand during settlement from the 1600s all the way to 1776. So let's talk about these humans. Okay, why are people here in the first place? You can typically categorize their reasons for coming to the colonies in one of four areas. They're either here for religious freedom, profit, as a result of servitude, or as a result or a product of slavery. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're just going to go left to right, top to bottom. Okay, so religious freedom. The three main groups, I'm going to zoom in here real quick. The three main groups that you'll see over here in the colonies are Puritans, Quakers, and Catholics. And in a subsequent lesson, we'll talk about where specifically they all are because they kind of settle in different areas. Some of them are not very friendly to one another, Puritans especially, but we'll dig into that in a little bit. All right, so Puritans here, Quakers and Catholics, are all settled around in the colonies. And now, the reason that Puritans and Catholics don't get along, we can go ahead and blame it all the way back on King Henry VIII. So King Henry VIII rules in the early 1500s in England when it is still an absolute monarchy and has not transitioned to a constitutional monarchy yet. So if you looked at him wrong, he felt as though, and the people felt as though he was justified to take off your head in public. Okay? So remember, King Henry VIII had 6 wives, but not at the same time. And his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, she was originally married to King Henry's older brother, Arthur. Okay, Arthur was originally supposed to be the king because he was the firstborn. Henry was the younger brother, and he was a playboy. He was like, I don't really care. I don't ever have to be king because my brother is going to do it for me. Well, lo and behold, his brother went off and died. And so then not only did King Henry have to take over the throne, he also had to take his brother's wife as his own. Gross. Akko taco. So he gets married to Catherine because he's the king, that's what he has to do. And then he's like, well, we need to pop out some babies, but I need a male baby because Lord forbid that you pass down the crown to a girl. But joke's on him because his daughter ends up ruling, but whatever. And she was pretty good. So he ends up being like, look, he was Catholic at the time, right? Great Britain and the United Kingdom were Catholic for a good many years until King Henry came along and was like, listen, this girl ain't popping me out any more babies. She is old, okay? She cannot have any boys. This is not working out. And King Henry and the Pope, who was the leader of the Catholic Church, are friends, okay? King Henry was like super serious, very devout Catholic. He goes to the Pope. He was like, hey, you trying to get me a divorce because I can't have a boy? And the Pope was like, no, you're funny. Goodbye. You cannot have a divorce. And King Henry's like, bump you and your church. I'll make my own church so I can get divorced and do my own thing. Okay, so he ends up making the Church of England, or the Anglican Church, all right? Now, here's the deal. Eventually, this church becomes pretty corrupt, and the Puritans are a squad of people who are Anglican. They do like the Church of England. They don't like how it is set up right now, because these churches are super ornate and very, detailed, and a lot of stained glass and expensive stuff inside of them, and King Henry originally was supposed to kind of, tone it down because Catholic churches are typically very ornate and done up and have very fancy stuff inside of them, and the Puritans are like, this is not how Jesus works. We just need a little plain old square building. We're not here for this. And the Puritans want to fix the church, okay? But they end up splitting into 2 different groups because the Puritans are also the Pilgrims, and you're like, what? How are you going to tell me there's 2 different groups? Well, there are. So they are both Puritans. They both ascribe to the Puritan religion. However, Puritans just straight up want to fix or purify, hence their name, the Church of England, but they want to stay in England and try and make it work. They're the we can work it out type people, okay? And the Pilgrims are like, this ain't gonna function, because if they start criticizing the king at the time in the 16 and 1700s, they are most likely going to wind up dead, okay? So they're like, listen, we want a new church. We want to fix it. It's, it needs some repairs, but we're going to have to go out of England and make a new church elsewhere. So a pilgrim is someone who goes on a religious journey, okay? So these particular pilgrims with a capital P that we think about at Thanksgiving with their little weird balloon pants and buckle shoes, right, and their odd hats, they leave England and they wind up in the New World trying to get away from the king so they don't get killed while trying to fix the church. They got a lot going on, okay? Now, let's also talk about profit. So religious freedom we're going to put to the side for right now. And profit means that you have people who are coming to the New World to make money. They don't care about religion one way or the other. They're here to make some cash, okay? Here's the thing, though. If they're in the colonies making money, the colonies don't belong to the people that are here, besides the natives who, own it, and we stole it from them, but that's a story for another day. The king is like, listen, if you're going to go make some money on my land, you have to get permission from me and give me like a little business plan and tell me what your future aspirations are on my land. Because if you're out here making some money, you're going to need to give me a cut of it. Okay? So instead of just kind of going out and cowboying it up and sailing across the ocean on your own, you'd have to make a charter company. And a charter means that you have permission from the government. In this case, you have permission from the King of England. Go away. Go away, little thing. All right, and then we're going to move on to servitude. Now, these bottom two squares mean that people are here. So people are brought to the colonies either against their will or as a result of something they did, okay? So servitude are people that are brought here because of something that they did, all right? Now, indentured servants are people who are here in the colonies to work off their debt, okay? If they had debt that they could not repay, the way that they could choose to work off their debt if they wanted was to come to the New World and just work for someone else and give that person back their wages until their debt had been paid. Now, not every person who was an indentured servant got to go free, because some people who were like, well, you owe me X, Y, and Z amount of money would just keep adding on to that and be like, well, you owe me 1,000 more for this, or you owe me 100 more for that. And they weren't really fair to indentured servants, okay? Now, additionally, you could serve via a prison sentence, okay? Georgia, the 13th and final colony to be founded, was founded as a colony for prisoners, specifically, okay? So people, when they got sentenced for whatever crime that they did, let's say, for example, this person has robbed a bank, okay? An old-timey 1700s bank. I don't know what you would even rob it with. A knife? Your voice? Not sure. So, and people roll up in a bank and they're like, listen, give me all your cash, and they get caught. And the judge looks at them and is like, you can do one of the following things. You can serve 10 years in this prison in England and suffer in this nasty 1700s prison that does not give you 3 square meals a day, probably has a dirt floor and is gross. Or you can go work off the rest of your sentence in the New World and then be a free person in the New World when you're done. And a lot of people chose to come to the New World and serve in the prison or colony, and then migrate wherever from there. Now, the last one, and most likely the most significant reason people are here, is slavery, okay? Some individuals who are here in the colonies do not want to be here at all and were snatched from everything they know, their culture, their language, their family, their history, everything, okay? So slavery went on for a good, solid set of centuries. I would say probably 300 to 400 years without fail. Went back and forth across the Atlantic, typically from West Africa, and we know that took the form of a triangle. I'm not sure if I put it in here or not. I put it in there in the next one, so we'll talk about it then. So typically people who are here as a result of slavery, I did not put any specific bullets on this slide because I feel like we all know the horrors of slavery pretty well. Not saying that that's an excuse for not putting bullets, but here we are. So they would come from West Africa over to the New World and then could go back down to the Caribbean sometimes, or could go up here to Europe, and it just made a big giant triangle across the Atlantic. Okay, so slavery is an extremely big issue in the colonies and will eventually become a big issue when the Founding Fathers, the 55 old white men who try to put our government together post American Revolution the second time around, it will become a big issue in how we create our current form of government. All right? Okay, so what did they bring with them? People who are here either because of their own consent or not because of their own consent. One of the things they brought with them was the idea of mercantilism. Okay, you can say it mercantilism, you can say it mercantilism. I don't care as long as you know what it means. Okay, this should also be reviewed from world history, but if it's not, listen up. Okay, so mercantilism is the system of how mother countries, okay, or the countries who own the colonies, get rich and stay rich and try to compete and see who is the richest. Okay, that's pretty much what happens. And mercantilism takes the form of a triangle. Okay, so here's the thing: these three things on the side: export more than you import, so send out more than you bring in, or sell more than you buy, so you stay out of debt. The second one is colonies produce raw materials for the mother country. And the third one, wealth being measured in gold, takes the form of a triangle. Okay, so we start out here in the mother country. Okay, and the mother country says, now we have all these finished products, all these finished goods, rum, gold, what have you, and they trade it to West African kingdoms or West African slave merchants who then take those finished materials in exchange for slaves. So humans are being traded as a product, which we know they are not. But that is how people of African descent and people of mixed African descent were viewed for quite some time, especially by powerful white men. So they end up going on this particular section of the triangle trade called the Middle Passage. Okay, and now by the time, and we know slave ships were absolutely horrid, the worst conditions possibly imaginable for a human being. And by the time people got off of the slave ship in the New World, either in the Caribbean or over in the colonies, they were then used for manual labor, and the result of that manual labor was raw materials. So when we say colonies produce raw materials, we really mean manual labor in the colonies. Okay? And then those raw materials are shipped back to these mother countries in Europe and made into finished goods. Okay? So remember, there are three parts. You ship out more than you buy. You make raw materials for your mom country. And then from there, those raw materials get transported or transferred into gold, and they who have the most gold have the most power. Okay. The second thing we need to worry about is religious freedom, except only kind of. Okay. Puritans were like, yes, we want religious freedom, but only for us, not for anybody else. Okay. They were kind of hypocritical. All right. So Puritans only want religious freedom for themselves, not for other people. We created 4 states in New England because somebody pissed off the Puritans. Okay, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island. I'm missing one. What's the last one? I think Vermont. All 4 of those got created because somebody pissed off someone who was a Puritan. Okay, there we are. All right, and then the next thing they bring with them is their law system from Great Britain. And this is called common law. Okay, so people in the colonies are not writing down big old long lists of laws for people to follow. They just kind of snatched the one that they were used to from England. And when they came over here as colonists, were like, you know what? We're just going to keep this. Okay, so here's the thing. Common law is made by judges. And that should be setting off some alarm bells in your head. You should be like, what? I thought they were made by the legislative branch. You'd be right. But in this case, the law is made by a judge. And it's based on precedent. Precedent. Okay? That's that P word right here. I would highlight that if I were y'all, because it may or may not show up, I don't know, maybe on a quiz or a test somewhere. Just saying. So precedent here is past decisions. So if you are a judge, fresh out of law school, fresh on the bench, you got your little gavel, you got your little wig on, you got your robe, you are ready to sentence some people, okay? And an individual comes in front of you and has been accused, let's say it's the same person who was robbed a bank in our last example. They have robbed a bank, and they could get anywhere from 7 to 12 years. And you're like, I don't know how many years to give this person. I don't know. So you're going to look at other cases that have happened before that have similar circumstances and give them a similar sentence. Okay? So that's precedent. So that's a decision made by a judge. A modern day example of a law made by a judge would be gay marriage being constitutional. Congress has not passed any law. So people who make laws for us at the federal level, we call them Congress, they have not passed any laws about gay marriage being constitutional. However, the Supreme Court, or the judges, okay, made by judges, this is the Supreme Court building in case you're confused, this is in Washington, D.C., downtown, they made the decision that gay marriage should be constitutional, okay, and so their word is the law. You have to follow that law, okay. So common law is made by judges. Another thing that colonists bring with them is the idea of self-government. Because remember, at this point in time, the king does not care not nary a bit about these colonies because he's got problems of his own with his own house, whichever king we may be talking about. And the king also has problems because he's beefing with France. Okay, so in the meantime, people are allowed to govern themselves. They may be British colonies, but at this point in time, by the time the French and Indian War comes to a close and the king starts paying attention, people in the colonies don't have the same accent as British people. They don't dress the same way as British people anymore. They have their own type of trade, they have their own type of government, and they're not even worried about what Britain is doing. Okay? And the two types of self-government that we have examples of here in the colonies are direct democracy and representative democracy. Now we know what direct democracy and representative democracy are from the other day. And the example of this in the colonies is the Mayflower Compact. Okay, if you're like, I know what the Mayflower is, it's the boat that the Pilgrims came on over, okay, in 1620. So before the Pilgrims even get off the boat to use the bathroom, they have to make a government so that when they get off the boat, it's not the purge, okay, the Pilgrim purge. I feel like that'd be just terrible to watch, okay. So they make a pact that all of them are going to follow whatever government they make once they hit land. So we're going to listen to each other, is what they say. So they all represent themselves, okay? That's the Mayflower. A bad picture, but alas. All right, so the other one is a representative democracy. So we have an example of this in the colonies, and our colonial example of a representative democracy is the Virginia House of Burgesses, okay? So remember that a representative democracy means people elect representatives to vote and make laws on their behalf. Now, the only people who are inside of this House of Burgesses, this word Burgess is just another word for representative back in the day, okay? This means that typically, if you were voted into the House of Burgesses, you were probably a rich, old, white, land-owning man, okay? Because those are the only people who are making laws for us in the United States for a good many years, okay? So this is the first elected representative assembly in the colonies. Whew, that was a mouthful, okay? This is the first squad of people who make laws for others who are voted into their positions, okay? And that has been Origins Part 2.